Alright folks, today we're talking Weebill 2 smooth settings because this has been one of the most requested videos ever since the Weebill 2 came out. So today I want to show you how I adjust my custom settings so that we can get the smoothest possible footage out of the Weebill 2. And it's really important to note that if you don't adjust any of your settings, you might not get the full performance out of the Weebill 2. So let's get to it. Alright, so as I said, we're talking Weebill 2 smooth settings, and before we start, this video is also a part of the Gimbal Academy. And before we start, let me just walk you through some of the basic stuff that you need to know before we start adjusting these settings. So if we power off the gimbal here, you can see that we have 3 axes on a gimbal. Starting from the top, we have the tilt axis, which goes up and down. Then we have the roll axis, which goes left to right. And then we have the pan axis down here, which goes side to side. Those are the 3 axes that we're working with when we are talking gimbals. So now that we know what the axis does, the important thing that you always have to do before you start doing anything else is that make sure that your gimbal is properly balanced. This gimbal is balanced, and we don't want to go over that step right now, but if you don't know how to do that, I've already made a full tutorial on how to balance a gimbal correctly, and I will link it down in the description. The next thing we will do before we start adjusting the settings is that we'll go into the menu and then we will auto calibrate the gimbal. So we'll push auto calibrate and then we'll press start, and the gimbal will start vibrating and it will auto tune or auto calibrate the gimbal. So now that it's done with that, we'll press OK and we'll back to the menu, and this is where we can start adjusting the settings. But if you want to check how the balance is before you start anything, you can just go into the menu, in the top menu here, check balance, and if you see none of these bars pointing out to the side, you have a perfectly balanced gimbal. But if you see, if I press on the motor here, give some force on the motor, you can see some of the bars go to the side. That means that the gimbal isn't properly balanced. So you want these bars to have just one line right up above each other, and the gimbal is perfectly balanced. Let's go out of that. So let's start the video from the Gimbal Academy and adjust the settings on the Weebill 2. Alright, it's settings time, and this is where we will adjust the smooth settings of the Weebill 2. And the smooth settings is sometimes overlooked because if you just take the gimbal out of the box and shoot with it straight away, it might not be as smooth as you want it to be. So going into the menu and adjusting your smooth settings can really help on the smoothness of the gimbal and how your footage will look in the end. These settings that I'll show here are my preferred smooth settings for the Weebill 2. And we'll say one thing, if you're coming from the Weebill S, the Weebill 2 is not as smooth as the Weebill S is. The Weebill S can be really smooth, has some really nice transitions. This gimbal tends to be a bit more tacky on the in and out ramps, but let's adjust it so that it is as smooth as it possibly can be. So what you do, once you have auto-tuned your gimbal, you will go into the menus and you go into parameter settings, which is on the second menu right here. Parameter settings, and the first one is motor settings. And you can actually go in and adjust the motor settings. If you lower the motor settings a bit, you won't get as much force to the motors if the motor settings are set pretty high. And this will also help with the smoothness of the gimbal. So I would recommend auto tune it and leave it as it is. We'll go out of that. But the first one is smooth settings, smoothness, and it is one right here. And if we go into customize, you can see I have bumped mine up to 150, and the higher the number is, the more smooth the gimbal will be. You can also go in and choose low, medium, high. In the next one, that is follow speed, and follow speed is how fast or slow do you want the gimbal to react to your movements. In my case, I have it set to 45, 60, and 35, and that's the settings that fits my needs the best. Try it out and adjust them to your needs along the way. The next one is the joystick responsiveness, and this is the joystick down here. How responsive do you want the joystick to the gimbal to react once you press the joystick? I don't want my gimbal to react that fast, so you can see I set mine to 25, 15, and 15. Go to that one. And here are the deadband settings. The deadband settings for my gimbal is 7, 4, and 4. On the pan mode, I want some room in there to work with before the gimbal starts moving. That's why I've set it to 7. And the roll motor and the tilt motor is set to 4. I want a bit more time on the roll motor, on the tilt motor, before it starts turning. So those are my preferred settings for the smoothness of the Weebill 2. You can also just go in and choose the low, medium, and high, and in the PDF you can see what my preferred settings are for that as well. You can go down to the download section and download the PDF. There's also a gimbal guide and my checklist in that as well. So that's my smooth settings for the Weebill 2 and the ones that I think fits the best for my setup. And it could be a bit different for your setup depending on what camera you're shooting on. But try mine out first, and then if you don't like them, just readjust them from there. That is the Weebill 2 settings, and as you can see, I just switched the Weebill 2 out with the Ronin 4D. I'll get back to this in just a minute. But as I just said, if you're part of the Gimbal Academy, you can just download the PDF. But if not, there's a link down in the description where you can find the PDF as well. But let's just talk about the Ronin 4D, because DJI has sent this to me as a review unit, and I'm really pleased that they did this, because this is a gimbal and a camera that I find very interesting. And there's one thing I have to say, and that is you do not understand this camera before you get it in hand. It has 4-axis stabilization and it's just amazing. So I've really enjoyed shooting on this gimbal, and we were out shooting the other day, and here's some of the footage that you can see. It is buttery smooth. Some is shot with the 4 axes up and some isn't. But the way that this gimbal works and this camera is just amazing. So in the future I will come with some more videos about this, because I know that there's some of you guys out there that's interested in this camera, and I will say that you should be, because this really redefines filmmaking as a whole. So if there's anything you want to know about the Ronin 4D, please let me know down in the comments so that I can create some videos that would interest you about the Ronin 4D. But not more about this camera. This was a Weebill 2 tutorial and the settings that I use for my gimbal. So I don't have any more for you today. If this is the first time you're here, remember to subscribe. And lastly, stay creative and stay safe. And if you can, go out and shoot some dope videos. See you next time. Bye.
It's real.